I say we go ahead and start.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing that I wanted you to hop on here a lot, because I don't think you get this a lot, but I get this a lot of like, well, you're not a therapist, which I'm definitely not. But I do think there is some overlap, right? There's a lot of gray area when it comes to a therapist versus a counselor.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, a therapist or a counselor versus a coach. And that aspect of like clinical versus more consulting type application, which I would consider myself more of a consultant and you more of a clinical worker. So maybe you could just spend a little bit of time talking about your background. What did you study? What were you taught in?
Sure.
And what was that certification process like?
Yeah. So I'm an LCSW, and that's licensed clinical social worker. And that's one brand of mental health therapist. There are lots of other licensing criteria like an LPC, licensed practicing counselor, I believe. That's what that stands for. And LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist. So there's lots of acronyms around the licensure. I'll tell a little bit about what my journey towards education and licensure and certification has been. My bachelor's was just in a Bachelor of Arts General. I didn't specialize in anything. I went on to get a Master's of Social Work after that, and then post-Master's for the LCSW at the time. There was 2 years of supervision, working with clients, working with a supervisor prior to being able to sit for a licensure exam.
Mm-hmm.
And then after all of that, sat for the exam, passed it, and I could then begin seeing clients. And I believe it's certainly evolved over the years. I think now you can have an MSW, I think, which is a licensed master's in social work. That didn't used to exist. And that is usually someone who is working towards their licensure, but they're still an MSW, and they can just get licensure there.
So education, you have to test for a license.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you also have to have like clinical supervised hours.
Yes, the clinical supervision is before the license, and then post license. Once we're licensed, the Board of Health wants to make sure we still are current and know what we're doing. Yeah. So it's wise, and so we do continuing education. We do every year. I think it's like 15 hours of it, and it's good. It's an opportunity to learn current trends, current approaches. It's also usually a great opportunity to network.
And so that's funny because I as a consultant, right, a personal trainer. Do you have any idea what the certification is for a personal trainer? What somebody needs to do to call themselves a personal trainer?
Not. And I just know that you've been working really hard on your degree, and so I'm curious to know what your criteria is.
So, well, I think it starts off like just from a general perspective. I'm like, what's the difference between a coach and a psychologist, or a coach or a consultant and a psychologist, or a counselor or a therapist, licensed clinical social worker, whichever name, is the amount of school that you have to go to be able to go and say, I am this thing, and continued education, like you said, and like networking with other professionals so they can kind of check you're crazy and make sure that you're like following the rules.
Yeah.
And a coach, anybody can call themselves a coach. You don't need anything. There are online certifications that you can get, and most commercial gyms will make you have that to work in them, but anybody can go online, for instance, and just say, I'm a coach, I'm a strength coach. They can also call themselves a nutritionist too. That's real scary. They and if they can have like a piece of paper, which really doesn't mean a whole lot, they can take a online test, study for it for a few months, maybe not at all, and take something and get some kind of certification. In fact, when I was first trying to become a personal trainer, I went to 3 different gyms, one of which was a very like upscale gym. These were not like little nothing gyms. These were commercial gyms. And they all said that they would hire me as long as I got a certification within the first 3 months, which was terrifying to me. So I went to MPTI, which was a year-long didactic program. It was quite a bit of money. It was, half of my life because it was all my weekends while I was working full time for a year, and then went on to get other weekend certifications, and then just finished my master's degree with kinesiology. But I don't need to do any of that. And it's funny because a lot of people will ask me like, well, what do you do with your degree? Because they don't think like I'm going to be a personal trainer. I'm going to be like an exercise physiologist or something. And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. It's what I want to do. But there's no, you have to, I think as a trainer, as a coach, you have to be somebody that is willing to go out of your way to do it. And the other piece to that is that people don't even really recognize the difference, because they are not, whether a coach is going to go and connect with other coaches, which I do, or like go and spend the time and money on extra school, which I have, and other coaches have too. I'm definitely not the only one, but like the difference that the lay person they are not going to really know the difference. They would if that coach was their coach, and they had another coach, they would notice the difference. But most people aren't seeing like, well, not some people will, but most people won't see multiple coaches in their lifetime, right? They might, but the majority of people are not gonna. They might be the first coach that they've ever worked with. So anyway, it's interesting, I think. And so you have a mentor too that you work with, right? As well as you're working with your peers.
I do. Before I get into that, though, it's interesting what you were just saying about your career path and the requirements that are there that are pretty minimal, and that you chose to go way beyond that and grow yourself so that you could be much more, the work that I've done with you, like anybody who has a conversation with you is going to know that you're more than just somebody who got a 3 month certification. Is that what you said?
Yeah, something you could study and sit for within a few months, and that's one of the good ones. There's plenty of ones that are not great at all that you could probably pass with just a weekend.
Yeah, I mean, your concentration on just all of the layers, the form, the weight, the style, the nutrition, types of food to eat, like all of and how it supports, and then meeting people where they are. I mean, that speaks so much to the additional training that you've chosen to take on. So
thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, there's soapbox there, but cheer you on there. What did you ask me? I forgot.
I asked you if I know that you work with a cohort of other professionals, other clinical professionals in your field, and then additionally you have a mentor, right?
I contracted with a clinician to provide supervision to me. So sort of a mentor, but she really does provide deep clinical supervision. If I'm working with someone and I'm not, got a question about it, or I'm confused about something, or a lot of times she's actually, her specialty is in ethics. She's an ethicist. And so we have fantastic conversations around the ethics of given situations in my work and in social work in general. And so it's really fascinating. I don't have to work with her, but I choose to, because when you're in private practice, it's, it can be kind of isolating. I'm in an office by myself. There's nobody seeing my work. It's like just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty conscientious, you know, so that's okay. But I think it's really helpful to have a sounding board, another person that I can say, you know, this happened this week in session. I'm kind of confused about it. I don't want to bounce it off you, that kind of thing. And she's just fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, but not only that, you've gone the extra mile too. I mean, you have a 500-hour you have a 500-hour yoga teacher certification, and you even teach yoga on your free time, right? That's not something that is something that, yeah, right. In addition to, by the way, internet friends, in addition to fostering dogs and cats, and being involved in church and all the other wonderful things that you keep yourself busy with, while still like maintaining an active life with your family and friends. So pat on the back to you, and working out 4 times a week. I will say
my favorite thing.
Yeah, little addition there. So, so tell me about. So you already have the cohort. You already have, and I don't mean this critically, because I'm the same way, kind of going the extra mile. That's why I work for myself too, because I know that I will go the extra mile no matter what I'm doing. So I might as well just do it for myself. But so you have your cohort, you have your mentor, you have you have ongoing like CEUs you have to get, continued education credit. And so why then go and get a 500-hour, which is like this second tier? It's like the more advanced yoga certification. Why become a 500-hour registered yoga teacher?
So a couple of reasons for that. You know, we did the 200-hour together, and I think that we wrapped that up in 2019, right? Was that
a long time ago?
I know, it feels so long ago. And I remember after that, I was like trying to find my feet, find my legs, whatever that saying is, with teaching, and just having a really hard time with confidence there. And then the pandemic happened. And so I taught my friends online just to sort of keep the language of cueing current. And then I thought, well, now they're doing the 300-hour. Why not just keep going? What else are we doing during a pandemic? You know, there's nobody's going anywhere.
That's when I went to started grad school.
Do that, right? And so part of it was that there was a little more free time, honestly, during the pandemic, because like we weren't able to go anywhere or do anything. So travel was out, driving around, going to restaurants or whatever, that was kind of out. So so I did the 300-hour, and my reasoning for wanting to do yoga teacher training at all is because it really kind of dovetails nicely with mental health therapy. There is such a mental health component to yoga practices and how to like care for the subtle body. So it, and I was also seeing a lot of need for it in my practice. You know, I would have someone come in and I would see that maybe they were distracted. Maybe it was the commute. Maybe they were stressed about something. Probably, I mean, they're coming to see me, you know. So, so I would say, you know, why don't we pause? Why don't we start with some, and just take a minute and set down whatever happened before you got here. And so we breathe and we meditate, and then before long, I had people coming to see me and asking for that. Can we do that breathing thing? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that breathing thing. And it's maybe like 5 to 10 minutes of breath. And then it really creates a container where they're able to receive the therapy and receive whatever needs to come through in therapy. And so it's really beneficial. And it's been mostly fun. Mostly fun, sometimes hard, but mostly
can't all be fun.
It can't all be fun, right? Yeah.
So tell me, in your training, so I know you had the yoga training, but then in your professional training, what were some of the things that you got into? Like, what were some of the topics that you studied in your education?
So Lots of behavioral health, DSM-4, diagnostic information, just that kind of thing, human behavior in the social environment, really dating myself probably with that.
I don't think so. I think that's great. Yeah. What were the titles?
Yeah.
What were the titles of some of the courses?
I mean, that was some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's been like a really long time, so I don't remember the courses. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't know. But then talking about like different approaches to take, like cognitive behavior therapy and mindfulness, and then family systems work, that kind of thing. Just really looking at the different approaches to caring for this subtle layer of mental health.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And for me, I think we took sports psychology, which is very interesting, but then also, of course, like strength and conditioning. I took a class on ergogenics, so looking at the nutrition of performance. And what else did I take? Research methods, of course. I'm sure you took that too. Very, very
I do remember that. Oh,
very
gosh.
useful
I
class.
blocked
Very
that
boring
out.
class.
Why did you bring that back?
I know. I'm sorry. I took a neuroscience course. I don't know if you took any of those, but that was super interesting, although also very hard. I took kinetic anatomy, and mind you, I know mine is fresh, yours is not. Tactical strength and conditioning, so looking at like army and military populations, that was also very interesting. What else did I take? Another strength and conditioning class, ergogenics. Yeah, there were a bunch in there. There were several others that I'm forgetting at the moment, but more physical, of course.
What was the
looking at
tactical, what did you say, tactical army?
Tactical.
What was that?
Tactical strength and conditioning. So it was a strength and conditioning course, but it was specifically for the tactical population and how things how to approach them. In some ways, it was a lot like any strength and conditioning class, but it was examining it through the layer of the tactical athlete, which is really, really interesting because a lot of times in kinesiology and sport exercise science, you're looking at it from an athlete's perspective or like general population, general health. But a tactical population is very different because the stakes are so much higher. If an athlete doesn't perform, they lose, which is like not great. But besides like ego and maybe money, there's not a whole lot that's on the line. Versus a tactical population, it's obviously very bad if they don't perform. It could mean the difference between life and death for them or others. So it's important that that population is taken care of. So it was and they're up against some barriers that other people don't have. For instance, their schedules are not their own, and they might have they might have or do not have certain equipment. And also looking at like how to do a needs assessment on a tactical population, because it is so important. How to do a good needs assessment on a firefighter or a police officer or somebody that's in the military, by really breaking down the biomechanics of whatever movements that they have to perform for work, and then looking at how we can translate it over to a test and then also to training. So
that gets in depth.
Yes, it was a really fun class. You're kind of making me miss school a little bit. So
that's a great feeling. That's a great feeling.
So the people that I work with primarily are for me personally, I mean, obviously for trainers, like you run the gamut, but for me personally, the people that I coach are general populations, and then also recreational athletes, and definitely a lot of recreational athletes. So I train a lot of yogis, a lot of power lifters, a few jiu-jitsu athletes. I've trained somebody that participated in strongman. I've trained people that want to run races or whatever. Mostly my clients want to live better and have more vitality to be able to bring to life. They want to be fitter, stronger, leaner, look better naked,
Yeah.
whatever, have confidence at work. Right. They just want to be, better within their own life, and they want to kind of show up better that way.
Yeah.
But who is your population? Like, what kind of people, what problems do people have that see you? What's your kind of like the person that fits well with what you do?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that they're up against?
So it's kind of interesting. Like some people, some clinicians choose to specialize in a certain area, and I've kept it pretty general on purpose because I wouldn't want anybody to look at my information and see and think, oh wow, well okay, I don't think they can help me. So I've been kind of general with it. I tend to see a lot of anxiety and depression in this area. So if I were going to say I specialize in anything, I would say that because I just have a lot of experience with it. But I see a lot of different things. Sometimes it's specific life situation. Somebody is in the midst of a big change, whether that's a job change or a divorce or a grief, things like that. New school, moving, trying to figure out and get their footing. Sometimes that happens. I see, what is the age range? I always get a little stuck on this because I don't ever really like to say, oh, but no, I won't see you because you're too young. Like,
Right.
But 14 and up, usually.
Mm-hmm.
I would say little kids, I would refer them out because it's my office, my style is not really conducive to little. But there are lots of people who work with littles, so it's good. But yeah, I feel like I lost track of the question. What is my focus?
Yeah.
What is that focus? Well, I lost my
Depression.
focus.
Yeah, right. It is the end of the day. So depression and anxiety, mostly.
What'd you say? I'm sorry.
Depression and anxiety.
Depression and anxiety. Yeah.
Clinical issues.
Yeah, those are the main things, and then grief. But grief is so. I do have some people I'm working with who are experiencing grief, and it's so complex and unique. Like one of my favorite teachers of grief work is David Kessler, and I heard him speak a couple of times, and now I'm like a huge fan of his. But he just makes so much sense. He used to work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and helped develop the 5 stages of, at that time it was death and dying, and now it's grief and loss. And his work is just, if you're experiencing grief, I highly recommend him and his website, grief.com. But I do see a lot of grief, and it's interesting. I don't get a lot of men coming in, but I do occasionally have a man come in for therapy, and I'm always just like so happy to see them, because I feel like our culture doesn't really support men being vulnerable and asking for help. And I've had a couple of men come recently, and they're just really showing up with an open heart, and I am just blown away by the work that they're doing. Because it's work, right? It's work. It's like, how do you show up for yourself?
And so you're helping people manage stress, regulate emotion, right?
Yeah, strategies. We talk about those things.
Figure out their interactions.
It's interesting. I was listening to you talk a little while ago and started thinking about the place where our work kind of overlaps or intersects is lifestyle habits. Because a lot of, from my work with you, we've talked so much about my habits, my lifestyle choices. What am I choosing to prioritize? What are just the routine habits that I have in place? And a lot of times I'm having a very similar conversation with my clients early on, depending on what they want to work on. But I want to usually know, like, how are they sleeping?
Right.
How are they moving their bodies? I don't call it exercise because everybody has a different feeling around that, and they're not coming to me for that.
Right.
So I call it, how do they move their body? What does it look like? Whatever it looks like. And then how do they fuel their body? What are they choosing to eat? I have those conversations with them, and it's not through the lens of being a nutritionist. I'm not a nutritionist.
Right.
It's more through the lens of building awareness of what their choices are. Like, what are they choosing to eat? What are they choosing to do to move their body? What time do they choose to go to bed? What is their sleep hygiene like? So there's overlap there for sure.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the same could be said in a different context. If you were talking to a career counselor, for instance, or a career coach, they might ask the same questions, but from the framework of the career. And, it's interesting you ask about men. Somebody recently asked me why I haven't niched down to females, like exclusively. And I have females for sure that I train. I think females go and get coaches more readily than men do as well, especially females seeking out female coaches. However, because there's just not that many of us. However, I do have and have always carried about 20% of my clients as men. I wouldn't say it's a 50-50 split, but I don't think it's a 50-50 split in the market either. So, but I agree with you. I think it's, the conversations that I have with women, especially women that might be like kind of interested in what I'm doing. And if we sit down and we have the conversation, this objection of like, well, I think I'm just going to try to do it myself happens a lot more in men than it does in women. And I don't see it, always working out.
But that's the societal, like, that's it, right? Like,
right.
That's the culture.
I'm not going to ask for directions.
Hey, I'm not going to ask for directions.
That's what I always think about.
Just handle it. I'm going to go into my cave. I'm going to get it done.
So the difference, maybe is like a coach. I deal with people a lot where we sort out their motivations around diet and exercise, because at the end of the day, even if I am in their pocket all the time as an online coach and accessible and flexible and available, and have all these different ways to kind of catch them, they still have to be the ones that live their life day in, day out. Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of figure out where their motivation is. Doesn't mean that they have to feel 100% motivated all the time, but at least if we can identify where they're at and then see, how we can nudge them forward closer to more internal, intrinsic motivation. So we're doing that. We're also working on emotion regulation. If there's something to do with it, let's say they're going into the gym and they get really pumped and they go and they max out every time, or the opposite, they go in and they get nervous, right? And don't up the weight ever. Like, these are just two sides. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Two sides of the same coin, that there's still something there that we want to talk about and at least bring to the light. And then I'm sure you deal with this self-efficacy, probably one of the most powerful. I think that there's autonomy, there's self-efficacy, and there's connection. And those are kind of the three bases of motivation, right?
Yeah, totally.
So tell me, so we kind of talked about functions, and we talked about application, and we talked about education. So what would you say, can you think of like, what would you say is the biggest difference after having this conversation? What do you think the biggest difference between a coach and a clinical counselor, therapist?
The biggest difference?
Mm-hmm.
That's too hard. That's a weird question. I don't know. There's layers, right? Like, I don't know. It's not that black and white. That's what I mean. It's not weird. It's not a weird question. But it's like there's layers. There's some overlap, and then I'm working more with them on growing in their self-reflection and their willingness to shift some of the behavioral habits that they might have, some of the what is the story they're telling themselves, habits, and that also exists in the physical realm, right?
I will give you my answer,
Okay.
and I think you will agree. You can tell me if you agree. I think that, the clinical world deals with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I deal with performance. And
Mm.
not just performance like, going and playing the violin in front of a bunch of people, or even like going to a soccer game, but like performance, like how are you performing in the gym and doing these physical things? I mean, I can't do my job with no action. I can't do my job if somebody's sitting still.
Right. Yeah.
There has to be movement. So that's why I say performance versus your patients can have success even if they're sitting there doing nothing. Mentally.
Yes.
I mean, physically doing
Yes,
nothing.
and
Well, if they're sitting, I
interesting.
mean, like literally, if they're just sitting here like this can mean success as long as they're
Physically being still, yes, actually sometimes for people that's a goal. So physically being still. I think it's interesting because I think, in yoga we learned about how intertwined the mind and social work, we call it the biopsychosocial spiritual aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of these layers are just so like a tapestry.
Right.
And so the work that someone might do with a mental health therapist is going to support
Yes.
the work that they do with their personal trainer and every other element of life, ideally, because
Right.
they're learning how to show up as a better version of themselves.
Yeah. Well, that's mental health, right?
Yeah.
We don't go without our brain anywhere. So however we're attributing things and whatever, digesting things.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a client of mine could be successful within stillness. Like I don't think the culmination of my effort happens in stillness. It happens in action. Like it happens in the external.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the culmination of yours can happen way more in the internal, I think. They both intertwine. Of course they do. Versus like what you're doing on the inside happens outside, and what happens on the outside affects the inside. So like both of them have to be addressed by both of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that like if we painted a picture of success, one would be like there just would be kind of different. And I don't know if it would be a picture necessarily, but you know what I'm saying?
It's that internal landscape, and then how are you going to take that work out into the world through actions?
Yeah. So very interesting. I don't know what else. I guess I have a better answer for when somebody asks me, what's the difference between a coach and a therapist. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Anything else you want to leave with? Any other questions you have, or anything else you want to explore?
No, just thank you for inviting me. This has been fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad we worked out the technology. Hooray!
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's ask. I think we do have a few people on. Anybody have any questions? Let's see.
How do you tell who's on?
I can see it. I don't know. It's at the bottom. Anybody have any questions? Let's see. I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right, Eleanor. Well, enjoy your night.
Thank you. You too.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.